everybody. Welcome to JCLive, your weekly source for JCL news and fun. I'm your host, Mr. Kurt Ristroff, Publications Chair for the National Junior Classical League, an organization of middle and high school students in classical courses. And everything on my screen is in a different place from how it normally is, so please bear with me because, as you can tell, I'm in a new setup. I'm not at home where I normally am, so I'm on a laptop instead of my computer. I don't have two monitors. Everything is different, but everything works. With me today, joining us for a very special panel discussion, are three outstanding SCLers and lawyers, now all three of them. Could you all introduce yourselves?
All right, I'll go first. I'm Megan Silver, and everybody calls me Sean, so that's what he'll refer to me as.
Brendan, you go.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Hi, I'm Brendan Walsh.
Hi, I'm Neha Patel Anderson.
And so these are three very good friends of mine. They're all SC lawyers, as you all know, actual lawyers who are all in JCL. So we're going to be talking to them tonight about how they got where they are. So everybody's been a JCLer, everybody's familiar with Latin and is very familiar with the national organization. You guys have all been to, I mean, Neha's got her silver bowls, Sean's almost at her silver bowl, Brendan's getting up there too. Brendan's, I'm sure, in double digits. Almost in double digits. Brendan's been to more nationals than I have, I think, or roughly the same. So fantastic, dedicated folks, love the organization. And the point for the chat is, if you have questions, feel free to ask away. I do have a small chat window on a small corner of my screen, so I can still read the chat and follow along and everything else. So the first thing I wanted to ask y'all is if you could tell us a little bit about yourselves. We've got your names, but could you tell us where you're from, what you do? The floor is yours for a couple of minutes for intros and things like that. Because I know you're lawyers, but I don't know much more than that.
All right, well, all right. So I'm from Florida. Been here the whole time, stayed here for undergrad and for law school. Now I practice in Tallahassee, and I work for a state agency, and I'm a regulatory attorney that oversees mutual wagering in the state, which includes cardrooms, horse racing, dog racing, highlight, and slot machine facilities.
So what do you do
over those,
with those?
For a state agency?
Okay.
We oversee the facilities that are permitted through the state, so they have to get a license or a permit through the state to operate. And if they break any of the laws that are associated with those facilities, we can prosecute them. So it's not criminal law, it's regulatory law that we prosecute them under. And we also face challenges for all of our agency actions. Other entities can sue us, and so we're constantly in litigation. It's a lot of litigation.
So litigation means you're in a courtroom a lot in front of a judge.
Yes, but we don't have jury trials like you do in criminal court or in civil court. We're administrative law, which is a whole different realm.
Gotcha. Neha, how about you?
So I work for a DC agency, so not a federal agency, and DC is not a state, so I can't call it DC state agency, but it's equivalent. And our agency provides services to adults with intellectual disabilities. And my job is getting guardians for adults who need assistance with decision making and whose families either are not in the picture or are taking advantage of them.
So does that involve, on the day-to-day, is that a lot of writing, a lot of litigation like Sean was saying? What is it?
A lot of writing, a lot of court time. Right now during the pandemic, they've made court online because people still need that guardianship assistance sometimes. And it's bridged out from that to providing the agency with advice about other types of decision making, support that you can do for people who need it. So it's not just people who have intellectual disabilities. It could be someone who has severe debilitating mental health issues, or Alzheimer's or dementia, and or just has so serious health problems that they can't make the decisions themselves at the time. So there are a lot of different legal tools out there to do that without having to go to court, and we always try to do that first, but it is still a lot of court time. And during the pandemic, obviously it's really important because there are people who really need medical treatment really fast, and so there can be a lot of emergency hearings to try to get people the assistance they need.
And Brendan?
Yeah, so I did my undergrad in law school in Texas, from East Texas, and I actually am also in DC. I work for a private firm called King & Spalding. I'm an associate there in what we call the Special Matters group, but generally what I do is I'm in an investigations practice. So when the government, aka Sean, comes and investigates a company or one of our clients, and we know that they're being investigated, we will actually come in and conduct a similar investigation first, figure out what we think might happen and what we think the government might be interested in, and then we use that information to defend our client. Hopefully not in court, but if it gets to court, then in court as well.
So that's the first question I had, because I'm a total law novice, right? I have no legal experience, never have been to law school or anything like that. I do listen to a law podcast, though. And one of the things that I learned from this that a lot of people in the chat might not realize is I thought just things were always going to court. I didn't realize that a lot of times the goal is to try and settle outside of court. So it sounds like all three of you try to do some of that. And there is also something called arbitration that is different from both of those. So could you describe the differences? But what's your order? What do you try and do in these cases? Do you try and settle? What is arbitration? And then ultimately, is litigation the last course, or what? And I know it's going to be different for all three of you.
So for my state agency, I think the vast majority of cases do settle out of court. But a lot of times, if there isn't a lot of pressure to resolve the case, we put an offer out there, and we know that even if we give a deadline, sometimes the attorney's telling us, well, I can't get in touch with my client. I think he wants to accept this, but we don't hear back for a couple weeks. So we actually put the pressure on by referring things to the court. That's a lot of times the only way we can get things settled is by pushing things forward. Otherwise, they just sit indefinitely. So we don't have a statute of limitations or something that requires us to move very quickly in these cases. So they can just sit for a long time if we don't take initiative to move them forward. We do not do arbitration or mediation, but technically mediation is available between state agencies and other parties. We just don't typically provide that as an option for resolution of our cases. But the court time, we go before an administrative law judge. So we're not in county court or circuit court. So these administrative law judges know our type of law, but they may not specifically know our practice area and the exact matter that we're regulating. They know generally how these go, and sometimes we have to educate them on very detailed practices or extensive statutes that regulate the industry.
Is there an administrative law appeals judge also?
What's that? Administrative law what?
Appeals judge?
No, all of our appeals actually go up to the District Court of Appeals in Florida. So they go to the same courts that everybody else appeals to.
Gotcha. Okay, we've got a lot of good questions coming in from the chat, so I'm going to start getting to those, and I've got one more from me that's a general question, and I think goes into what Dennis Webb just asked, because he's a regular viewer of this show. He says, did you plan to be attorneys when you were in high school? And so that ties into my next question was, can you talk us through your journey from JCL through law school and to being lawyers?
Somebody else for this one?
I'll go for it. Sure. I did know I wanted to be a lawyer in high school. I was one of the few Asian kids in my class that was not into math and science, and I wasn't very good at it, frankly. And I always liked humanities and writing and speaking and doing all of that, logical thinking, philosophy. So I figured that was the best way to go. At the time, I was really into Model UN and youth legislature, and of course JCL. I did national office, and speaking in front of, the entire convention will make you a better public speaker over a week than any other course you could take. So it definitely inspired me to want to see things get better. And I think JCL sparked that in a lot of ways. How to build something, how to create something like a convention, or like initiatives that officers come up with, or even students and teachers come up with, to make their schools better, to make their communities better. So I knew from the beginning that whatever law I did, it needed to be something that I could see how it was helping real people. And so it doesn't, just so you all know, if that's something you're considering, it doesn't pay a lot. And you do have to work pretty hard, and it can be frustrating because nonprofits, government, there's always red tape, there's always a lack of money, and you are working with people who also may not have representation. A lot of the work I do, the family members or the person we're trying to help doesn't have a lawyer of their own. They get a court-appointed lawyer, or they just don't have one. And you're being sensitive to that. You're being sensitive to the fact that they, may not have had as much education. They may not know how the system works, and you end up explaining it to someone who you're actually on the other side of the bench from, to try to help it be fair. And that's what's really important to me when I'm doing this work. But the road was an interesting one, because even in college, I knew that's what I wanted, but I almost went to psychology. I went this, for a little bit. I thought maybe that's what I'll do instead. And I came back to law school. And honestly, I didn't love law school. I went into my first year and thought, what have I done? Is this really what I want? And because I started it, I'm one of those people that usually finishes it. So I did. And ultimately realized that it was about the destination and not as much the journey. So I the journey really started when I started working and started seeing how I could help people. So
thanks. So Sean and Brennan, you're going to get the same question, but I want to ask Neha real quick, because talking about explaining the law to the person on the other side of the bench, I've heard colloquially that lawyers prefer when the other person is also a good lawyer. Like, you prefer when both people in the room are good lawyers. Not good in a sense that they're like nice. It's obviously preferable if the other guy's not a jerk also, but like, I have heard that it is better when everybody knows what they're doing, because then everybody can predict what everybody else is going to do, and you can sort of figure it out, and it all sort of shakes out much more easily and readily. Is that true? You're all nodding your heads.
That's absolutely true. It makes everything easier. It makes, honestly, it makes it more fun for me personally, because everyone knows what they're doing, but you're also not dealing with people's insecurities or people taking it personally because they themselves have their own insecurities about their abilities. Whereas good lawyers can disagree if they're smart, if they have learned their trade well. They can disagree. They can fight tooth and nail, but still be professional, cordial, and respect each other at the end of it. And so I have always appreciated working with and against attorneys who are good, and I mean good at what they do. I think the hard part is when you're dealing with families, and sometimes people who are representing themselves, they just don't have that choice. So you still have to do your job as an attorney and represent your client well, but you can do it without being cruel, and you can do it without being unfair. And you can also make sure that the court is giving them the representation they might need, because sometimes the court can do that. So there's a lot to think about, because you're thinking about it as a quote officer of the court. It's this title they throw at you that means you're supposed to be spotless. You're supposed to be ethical, and you're supposed to do the right thing all the time.
And you do have this ethical obligation to zealously, what's the phrase? Zealously argue for your client, or zealously advocate? Zealous advocacy, right?
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Sorry, and I think Sean was going to say something, and I.
Yeah, Sean,
I
what were
was
you
going
gonna
to jump. No matter how adversarial things get, no matter how much you and opposing counsel can't see eye to eye, it is so much easier if both of you are know what you're doing and are familiar with the procedures, because it makes it so much harder, especially when you may already be butting heads with opposing counsel about some things, to have to politely explain to them how to do their job, because if they don't like you and they don't trust you, they're going to do that much worse of a job. Just avoiding doing what you're telling them is the right course of action. And not in a, here's how you should try your case, but here's the things that are allowed versus aren't things that aren't allowed in administrative law or something like that. I mean, I get along with our frequent opposing counsels. We are very frequently in court with the same people over and over again, and I get along with them very well. But every once in a while, someone comes in who isn't familiar with this type of law practice, and they're representing, someone from the industry, and they're like Neha said, their insecurity is it just makes it a much worse situation when they don't know what they're doing. They're insecure about it, and then they get touchy about any, polite or, attempt at help that you try to give them. They feel like you're being condescending when you're really just trying to make things go smoothly for everyone.
Gotcha. Well, Sean, since you have the floor, can you tell us your backstory, if you will, your journey?
Yeah. So mine is nearly the opposite of Neha's. I had no idea I wanted to be an attorney for the vast majority of my life. In high school, I fell in love with Latin, and I decided to go to school as a classics major. I thought about becoming a Latin teacher, but to be honest, it was going to be far too difficult for me. I'm not cut out for that, and I applaud the people who are cut out for that, because I think I took the easy path by going to law school and becoming a lawyer. I actually also just loved law school. I absolutely adored it. But not the first semester, the second semester was a little rough too, but I really loved law school as a whole. And I really enjoy the practice of law. I was one of those people that was told you shouldn't go to law school because you don't know for sure that you want to be a lawyer. But at the time, I just knew for sure that I wanted to go back to school, and I didn't want to get into the real world any sooner than I had to. So 3 years of schooling later, I got out, passed the bar, and I've worked for the same state agency since I began as a law clerk, and I've loved every minute of it. I'm currently developing my expertise in this practice area and trying to become board certified, which is essentially another bar exam, but just related to my practice area. And I don't know why I'm doing that to myself. I want to know everything about this type of law, so.
I'm not sure I understand.
Brendan, your turn.
Sure, yeah. I'm definitely more on the Sean side of the spectrum than the Neha side of the spectrum. I had no idea I wanted to study law at any point in my life until I started studying for the LSAT. I went to undergrad at a school called Texas State because they had a great Air Force program there. And my dad's a pilot. All I ever wanted to do was be an Air Force pilot. I never really thought about doing really anything else, except maybe for like 5 or 10 minutes at random points in my life. And so I did the RTC Reserve Officer program there. I was selected for flight school and was medically discharged. So I didn't commission, and I had to figure out what else I was going to do with my life. I had about a week's notice before I graduated undergrad that I wouldn't be going into the Air Force. So I moved back home. I worked in Houston for a little while for doing odd jobs, really. I worked for an oil and gas company called Enterprise Products for a little while, doing pipeline scheduling for Louisiana, which was great because it was all the places where my cousins live. And then I got laid off from that job, which was great, in 2015. And I started doing random odd jobs. I was a substitute teacher. I hosted trivia. Just anywhere I could, stall until I figured out what I wanted to do. And I had my old Air Force commander was a great mentor of mine. And I was heading out, and I went out back to school to talk to him, and he said, well, you remind me a lot of me, and I always thought that I'd be a good lawyer, so have you ever thought about doing that? And I was like, well, I haven't thought about it, but maybe I'll take the LSAT, and if I get a good enough score to get into a good enough school and not pay too much money, I'll go and do it. And so that I sort of just fell into law school because I didn't really know what else I was going to do. I had applied to a million jobs, and I got into these schools, and I was like, well, I could either go work in these jobs that I don't know a lot about, or I could go back to school. And sort of like Sean, it was it was like, school doesn't sound too bad right now. And I loved law school. I should say I loved parts of law school. I took a lot of very non-practical law courses. There are roads that you can go down in law school where maybe you'll be a very good practitioner if you take all of these courses on day one, but you probably still won't be that good. Or you can spend 3 years thinking about stuff that's fun to think about. And I went down the think about stuff that's fun to think about route. I worked at a court in the Netherlands for a semester. I worked for our human rights clinic, doing political persecution cases. I worked for a federal judge in DC, which is how I ended up out here. So I have a very long and meandering path that ended up where I am now.
Awesome. Well, that's good to know, for the people in the chat. Somebody was asking like, oh, what did you take in undergrad and how did that prepare you for law school? But it sounds like you don't have to necessarily be pre-law. No. You don't necessarily have to. Okay. Could y'all tell us
I
about
would
that?
actually say, sorry.
Go.
Do you mind if I jump in?
Yeah.
I would say I went through the admissions process the most recently, and I think that a lot of the schools are looking for people who don't have the traditional law, quote unquote, pre-law majors like history or political science. In addition to that, some of the best students at our law school were people who had studio art degrees or classics degrees or things that don't necessarily, they're not learning the Constitution from their first semester of undergrad. I think in a lot of ways, the less that you know about the law before you get to law school, the better a position you're in to really absorb what they're trying to teach you. And at the end of the day, law school is not about preparing you for the bar exam. It's not necessarily about preparing you to be a good attorney. It's about wiring your brain so that you know how to think about legal issues. And if you come in with that mindset, then you're going to be a lot better off. And I think that a lot of the people that I knew who were the best at getting into that mindset were the people who weren't history majors, who weren't political science majors. That's not to say that you can't also be a great law student if you are a history or political science major, but it might be a little tougher because you have to sort of shake off the habits that you've developed for yourself in undergrad.
I think to that too. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Megan.
I was going to say, I think that undergrad, as much fun as I had as a classics major in undergrad, I think that how much I enjoyed it and the strategies that I used for studying there they didn't translate whatsoever into law school. I had to do things completely differently, and I still ended up loving it, but I had a really rough time transitioning into law school because I don't think it's much like any other type of school. I think no matter what degree you get in undergrad, law school is going to be a bit of a shock. And for me, it was a major shock. I could no longer kind of cram and generally understand things and do really well. I had to read books about how to take exams in law school.
Yeah.
It's different. It's notably different. And I did the opposite of what Brendan did. I took all the practical courses that I could take. I've always joked that law school is like, if you say, I want to be a painter, and then you go to art school and they make you memorize what the ingredients are on the tube of paint. And then you graduate from art school and you've never painted a painting in your life. That's law school.
Yep.
I would absolutely agree with you. To kind of go with what both of them said, critical thinking is what they teach you. And you go in, I went in thinking I was a really good writer. And maybe I am generally, but they make you write in a totally different way that makes you question everything you knew about what you thought you knew how to do. And that was hard for me. And that was a different feeling, to feel like I wasn't good at it and I needed to learn how to do it differently. But it made you become a better critical thinker. It made you become detail oriented, which is huge. It's something that I look for when I have interns and I try to cram into them for the summer I have them, that you got to be detail oriented, or that's when you lose based on where you put a comma in your sentence. But also, I think it does make you. So I majored in psychology and communication. I double majored in college, and then I think that both of them gave me the tools I needed, but so did Latin. I mean, so did classics, right? Learning how to translate a language that in some ways defies a lot of rules. It makes you really have to rethink how you see words and how you see sentences, how you construct them. And I think that that's important in learning how to write. So classics definitely gave me more than I thought it did. And I didn't realize it till way later. But what Sean said was really true too, that law school teaches you how to do this framework of things. But learning to practice is a whole nother ballgame. And you learn to do it when you get out and you get thrown into the fire by whatever office or company or firm you work for. They throw you in head first and say, oh, go figure out how to use the courthouse. Like, where do you file that document? And that's how you learn. And sometimes those internships, if any of you are really thinking about going to law school, those summer internships are really helpful in figuring out what you want to do and what you don't want to do. Because I did a first year summer with a nonprofit that helped, worked with direct services for people who were homeless. I did my second summer with, the Louisiana Child Protection Agency. And it made me realize that while I wanted to help people, I wanted to do it through the government vehicle instead of direct services through, legal aid or a nonprofit that helped people directly. So I think those summers some people do a summer at a firm and realize it's not for them. Some do it and say, nope, this is definitely for me. Or I don't like criminal law. I think I like this better. So that really helps you figure it out. Even if you can get a little experience in your college summers, if you really know this is what you want, getting unpaid internships here or there will help you at least have an idea of what you think you want. But I did a mix of what Sean and Brendan did in law school. I took some frivolous classes and some practical ones. I went to Georgetown for law school, and they had a special program for first years that you could sign up to be in the special section, section 3. Yes, I was in that section. And they taught law almost like a philosophy class, like they were teaching it not as in practical terms. So all our first year classes were mixes of things, philosophy and property law and how those fit together, how property law was built from philosophical terms and stuff like that. So it was like a liberal arts law degree in the first year, which is something interesting. And a lot of law schools are starting to do that. So if you're looking at a school, you may want to see if that's for you.
Cool. So from an outsider's perspective, it seems like medical school, like all of the post-secondary or post-undergrad, all the various things you can do, be it med school or law school or graduate school. It seems like medical school is installing a very fancy algorithm in your head that teaches you how to recognize symptoms, diagnose things, and figure out what's wrong with somebody, or it's also teaching you like mechanical skills for surgery. And grad school, at least engineering grad school for me, is teaching me how to think about molecules mechanistically and ask questions and make predictions from a scientific standpoint. And it seems like the generalization around law school is that it teaches you how to ask questions to take apart these issues and find the route through the law. You're using the law through these issues. Is that fair to say? That y'all really learn how to ask questions?
It's issue spotting, and they say learning to think like a lawyer. And I think legal writing is its own concept as well, that it has to be, you pretty much have to unlearn other types of writing that you've done throughout your life to be able to do legal writing. It's very structured, and it's designed not to be frivolous whatsoever. You have to follow the framework, and that's sort of how you end up thinking. And I never really realized how much it changes how you think and how you see the world until my mother, after having a conversation with her, she's just like, you don't talk like a normal person anymore. You just talk like a lawyer all the time. And we weren't talking about law. I don't even remember what we were talking about, but it really does changes your brain. And no matter how many practical courses you try to take, the vast majority of law school courses I find to be academic or philosophical or not practical in one way or another. It's either a survey of so many things that you get the gist of something without actually understanding how it's done here and now and in this court. But there's occasionally practice clinics and things like that you can take that will actually teach you, okay, well, here, when you get this case, you have to file this one document, and then you might have to file one of these 3 other documents. And none of the other courses will teach you that. That stuff you learn usually in practice. But I tried to take classes that were offered by actual attorneys that were practicing or local judges. Any of those were great courses because they told it like it is. A lot of legal answers are maybe, because it depends on a million things. So if you'd ask the professors a question, you weren't going to get a straight response. But a lot of times in the practical courses, if you ask a judge, well, if this happened and this happened, how would you rule? They know how that would happen because they've probably seen it play out in their courtroom, and they've probably already made that decision or something close to it.
Well, and I would add to that, Sean, part of my job is advising the agency I work for. I'm in-house counsel, right? I'm the deputy general counsel, so I'm there to answer their questions. And most of the time, the answer starts with, it depends.
Yeah.
And it depends on what they want to achieve. And we try to help them do that legally. Whatever it is they're trying to achieve, you're helping to get them there. So that's the other part of the job I do, is not just being in court and trying to get these guardians in place for people, but actually helping our agency serve people well and not run afoul of the law. So
yeah, I was actually going to make a joke about that earlier, that I'm incredibly lucky because right now I get to sit here and ask lawyers questions for an hour straight, and I'm not getting answers that start with "it depends," and I'm not getting a huge bill at the end of this either.
Oh, you didn't get the bill yet?
Send it to the JCL office. So an inevitable question that I've got to ask, and Neha already alluded to how the mechanics of the Latin language were helpful for you in your thought process, but something I think everybody wants to hear: how much did Latin vocabulary help you?
I think I know the least Latin of the 3 of us, and I think it helped even me. I think Neha had it perfectly right that one of the most useful things of studying Latin and going into the law is how critically you examine the relationship between words. Which in legal writing is extremely important in the investigation practice, where we're drafting lots of documents and going back into lots of, and we're dealing with, maybe 5 or 6 competing regulations, or maybe even different jurisdictions or different countries. It's very important to be able to sort of break down these things in a way that I think Latin started wiring my brain to be able to do earlier on than I otherwise would have been thinking about that.
I still find myself thinking back to, translating Cicero and things that my Latin teacher said, and different literary devices that were impactful in speeches. And I see myself reusing those because I realize that, this literary device will make this paragraph so much stronger. And it's crazy. I mean, these are things that I picked up in 9th grade that are helping my legal writing now, because now that I've learned legal writing structure, I can figure out new ways to make this structure more effective by calling attention to certain words and certain phrases and certain clauses that are more impactful in the case.
Those are great answers. That's exactly the kind of thing I was hoping to get. So thank you.
I will say this though, Kurt, and I don't know if Brendan and Sean will agree with me, but you do have to get over cringing at the way the words are pronounced. Because there are a lot of Latin phrases in the law.
Oh my God.
And they are butchered because that's just the way that they're said in the law. But as a Latin student, it makes you just want to curl up.
Yeah, they say prima facie instead of prima facie. Right?
Yeah.
All of it. Yeah.
I will say
so you have to get used
my
to that and
firm
not make
says
faces
pro hoc
because you
vice
just don't
correctly,
like the
which is
faces in the courtroom. So.
A question that has come in. Let me see. I wanted to find it. What is the dumbest lawsuit you ever had to endure?
I saw this earlier, so I can jump in with a quick story to give the more experienced attorneys time to sift through what I'm sure is a voluminous catalog of options. My first summer of law school, I worked for a federal judge in DC, and what you do as a judicial intern is you basically just write first drafts of the judge's opinions and on very basic legal problems you learn during your first year of law school, generally jurisdiction related, which is just the question of whether the court has the power to even render a decision in the case or not. We had a jurisdiction problem come in. The judge sat in DC, but he also heard cases in the Western District of Texas occasionally. And this was a Western District of Texas case where a car dealership in Nevada had sold somebody living in the Western District of Texas a car, and then that person had sued the dealership for some reason or another, and the dealership was saying, you can't sue us, we're in Nevada. And so the question was if they could be sued or not. And there is when you're talking about jurisdiction, there's a phrase that says, could they reasonably anticipate that they would be drawn into court in this jurisdiction for certain types of jurisdictional questions? And they were saying, no, we didn't reasonably anticipate that. We didn't know people would come from all over the place to buy our cars. Well, in our basic research and examination of the dealership's website, there is a page on the website that says, we know people will come from all over the United States to buy our cars. So I printed out a copy of the page and I brought it to the judge. And I was like, can we use this? And I think he still has the printed out page because he thought it was the
Oh my goodness.
You're a few good men crystal moment, Brendan. You only get one of those in a career, so be happy with it.
Oh no, it's a shame it was like my third week ever doing it.
Sean, you have a good one?
Yeah, so I can think of quite a few just absolutely ridiculous legal arguments that I've heard, but most of those would require giving you a full background of the legal climate of the case. So I think my most outrageous legal story has to go back to probably my first year of practice, where I was regulating real estate licensees. So this was someone with a real estate sales associate license, and I started reading through the facts of this case. We had done an investigation into it, and I was trying to decide if we needed to take action against his license. And well, he had been at a pirate festival in his free time, totally unrelated to his activities as a real estate agent. And he had made some pretty poor choices that led him to, I guess, take on the persona of a pirate and commandeer a vessel, a marine vessel that was not his. He hopped in somebody's boat and took off with it. And in the process of being apprehended, he managed to ram that boat into a Coast Guard vessel, which is very, very much a federal felony. So he did some time. He had no previous record. And I read through this, and I knew exactly what this pirate festival was. It's a Florida thing, and I can't. It's called Gasparilla. So if you want to protect your boats, keep them away from Gasparilla. Yep. But we did take action against his license, but we honestly got such a kick out of reading it. It was so funny to us that we allowed him to keep his license if he attended a record-setting number of meetings of the board. That was a penalty that you had to sit through without your cell phone, sit in 8 hours of deliberations in other hearings, and I think we gave him a whole year of that. Once per month. Once per month, he'd have to go in and sit for 2 or 3 days of 8-hour sessions. And we had to do that because we were paid to be there, and it was a little boring for us when our cases weren't up. We had to sit and listen the whole time anyway. But I think he got his MBA while he was in federal prison. So maybe after that, I hope he gave up the pirate lifestyle.
Somehow I knew that Sean was going to have a Florida man story for us.
It was the most Florida man story. It was ridiculous.
You sued a pirate. You took action against the pirate's life.
And if she wins, I don't think I have one better than that. It can't possibly. Mine are just people acting ridiculously, but not like that ridiculously. So.
So another question for the night, then, if you want to pass on that one, Neha. Andrew Barth asks, what does the Ninth Amendment mean?
I'm not touching that one. I'm not even going to try to answer that because I have no idea what he's wanting me to say. I will tell you, though, that, so I don't have as funny a story as Sean's, but one of the most ridiculous ones, I part of what I do is when I also, beyond getting guardians for people, I go after the ones that exist if they're not doing their job or they're stealing people's money or whatever. And some of them are attorneys. Some of them work as attorneys, and they get appointed by the court, and they're on a list. They get trained and stuff. But this attorney, when I went after her, she decided she was going to hire an attorney to represent her, even though she was an attorney herself. And so after the whole trial was over, she wanted her attorney to get paid by the person that she is the guardian for, a person who just has Medicaid and, barely any funds of his own. But she wanted him to pay her attorney to represent her, who was doing a substandard job as the guardian for the person, right? So, I mean, we thought it was pretty ridiculous. The judge laughed at her and threatened to send her to bar counsel. There was a lot of, and bar counsel, for those of you that don't know, is, the bad place. They're the people that tell you you're unethical and want to prosecute and take away your law license for doing something you shouldn't be doing. So you never want to get sent to them.
That's far worse sounding than sanctions, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're the ones that impose sanctions. They can suspend your license. They can take it away. They can order you to, complete things like Sean had her defendant complete. They'll have you do things as a lawyer to get your credentials back. So I always tell, for instance, our client that, you may be tempted to lie. You may be tempted to fudge it. You may even be tempted to sort of make it up because you don't know the answer. But when you do that, you're putting my bar license at risk. So it's not even just my job, but it's my ability to practice law, which means I have no career.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty strict with them about that kind of thing. But yeah. So mine is not as funny as Sean's. She should have gone last, actually. She had the best one.
Well, last question for the night. I think we're just going to skip the Ninth Amendment unless anybody's very passionate about it.
Is this the kid that's neglecting? Is this the guy that's neglecting his history homework? Is he trying to get us to do it?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't see. So last question of the night then from a good friend. Everybody knows Tyler. Tyler Heist asks, what's your favorite law/court-based TV show?
I like Perry Mason.
The new one or the old one?
I didn't know there was a new one. My mom watches it every night, and I sometimes see it with her. And I love how in Perry Mason shows, everyone always just confesses on the stand. If you get them tripped up just enough, everything just comes right out. And I kind of wish the practice of law looked anything like that at all, as if we didn't know everything that was going to be said prior to the hearing, prior to the trial. We've already done depositions. We know everything there is to know. We just have to put on a show for the judge. But I really like the big reveal at the end of those episodes.
Brendan, what about you?
I think I have to say Suits. I don't think I've watched really any of the other major law or court-based TV shows.
We'll accept movies
I think I'm the
too,
only person.
Brendan, if you want to say My Cousin Vinny.
Oh, okay. Well, I wasn't going to say My Cousin Vinny. If we're accepting movies, I think My Cousin Vinny is a solid number 2. Huh? Legally Blonde, absolutely. Top tier. But tied with Legally Blonde is A Few Good Men, which it's just too good. I'm a young male attorney in Washington D.C. Like it's who wouldn't want to be Tom Cruise? And you get a baseball bat, and you
get your set of steak knives.
Yeah, you get to yell at Jack Nicholson.
I mean, that is one of the movies that sort of got into my brain that's what it was going to be like. So I'd say it was my favorite too. But yeah, I find, Kurt, that a lot of the lawyers that I went to school with and that I'm friends with and work with don't watch any of those shows. Because either they get super irritated with the inaccuracies in the show, or they have to pick one that's so off the charts. Like, I liked Ally McBeal early on because it was just so ridiculous, and that was enough for me. But if it was trying to be too serious, I couldn't do it. I'd just walk away and leave the room.
Yeah.
So, but
I do want to change my answer. I want to change my answer to the episode of 30 Rock where Liz Lemon tries to get out of jury duty by dressing up as Princess Leia. I think that's my favorite law television show.
That is perfect.
Awesome. Okay.
But I also did like The West Wing, if that counts. I mean, it's not a court-based show, but there is a lot of discussion about the Constitution, about law, about government.
They're all lawyers, right?
Yeah, some of them.
Dennis Webb says Perry Mason was on CBS Radio from 1943 to 1955. I don't think Sean listened to it.
It's on, the TV shows are on MeTV now, and you can still see them. It's all in black and white, but it's still up there for anybody to watch.
Awesome. Okay, well, it's about 8:50, so we're gonna switch over now. I didn't do announcements at the beginning of the show, so we're gonna go through those real quick. And I wasn't able to change all of the scenes on.
I gotta jump off. It's been great.
Oh, okay. See you later, Brendan. Thanks so much.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
I'm going to go through some announcements real quick, and then Sean and Neha, I'll ask y'all to mute yourselves on this Google Meet if you would. I'll bring on the national officers, and we'll do officer updates, and then I'll come back in the Google Meet to say goodbye to y'all properly. So we'll go through some announcements real quick. Biggest announcement, it's December now, so there's a new December Club of the Month theme, or there's a new Club of the Month theme for December. It's Dining December, so ideas for Club of the Month activities are things like selling hot cocoa, or having a virtual club dinner together, or donating canned goods to homeless shelters or food banks. Again, as always, you don't have to follow the suggestions for Club of the Month, and you can submit whatever your club did each month, every month. There's more information in the description of the video, so you can go check that out. But for those of you who are interested in Club of the Month, let's see. Oh, yes, and Neha, thank you for being a moderator for the show. I forgot to say that earlier. It's also December, so a new Torch US just came out. If you haven't seen it, it is gorgeous. There's a link for it in the description below. The Winter 2020 issue. It's beautiful. It's full of really good content, so go check that out. And if you haven't, you can subscribe to receive those issues of the Torch as they come out in your email directly. So go check that out, and we'll be talking with Irene Calderon soon about her work on that. Remind your teacher to submit your club's info to register for JCL, and you could win some swag. I think everybody's seen this announcement by now. And last but not least, upcoming shows. We've got next week we'll have a discussion of Roman technology, Roman STEM, with Magistra Natalie Roy from Louisiana. And the next week will be an interview with NJCL editor Irene Calderon, who's the only officer who hasn't gotten an interview yet, and that was my fault for getting sick. So we finally get Irene on the show. So with that, I'm going to swap things over and bring on our officers. One sec. Here's Irene now. Great. Irene, can you hear me? Irene, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Hi, how are you doing? Could you tilt your camera down a little bit? We're only seeing the top. There you go.
Sure. Hello, everyone.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Good. We've just had a really excellent show. Fantastic guests. I love these panel discussions with JCL alumni. They're so much fun to do. What have you got for us this week?
I thought I could breeze through the Winter Torch a bit, because that's basically what I did for basically all of November and late October. So if I could share my screen a bit. Cool. Okay, so that's the cover. I wanted to feature mosaics of DLers a bit. Of course, for the spring and summer editions of the Torch, they'll be spring and summer themed. So if you want to be featured on the cover, just send me a picture when I call for them. Here's inside, and the voices. Thank you to my fellow officers for submitting their voice. And this segment to our teachers, this is basically a dedication to teachers. If you have a teacher a classics teacher that you really, really like, you can submit a write-up about them to me, and I can feature them in future editions of the Torch. And thank you very much, Cassie and Riona, for submitting their write-ups. Photo of the month and Club of the Month winners for September and October. Congrats to all. Untitled Roman Kitchen. This is actually my favorite article out of the ones I've written, because I got to actually make things, and I tried things, and I just ate food, and I really like that sort of thing. I plan to repeat this segment for the spring and summer editions of the Torches, and if you guys have any dishes that you would like me to try, just email me with those. editor@njcl.org. This is the cover story, The Secret Life of Ancient Pets, basically how the Greeks and Romans regarded various animals as pets. This is the technology section. Thank you very much, Kaylee and Mr. Ristroff, for submitting articles here as well. This is the modern myth section. I'm wanting to feature some more creative writing
pieces in the future for spring and summer. So if you have a creative writing piece that you really like, just submit that to me as well, and I'll gladly add it in. Thank you very much to Alicia for submitting her story, and for Maddie for submitting her beautiful artwork. It was a nice compliment to the story, I thought. Here are the state updates. Thank you to those who submitted. If you don't see your state, just have your editor or one of your officers submit a state update to me. Fall planning meeting report with pictures of San Diego State University to the side. Very pretty. I encourage you to look at them. Ads for the 2021 NJCL convention at San Diego State University. We really hope to see you there. And the 2021 NLE exam one. And yeah, that's basically all I have.
Thank you. It's a wonderful issue of The Torch. We appreciate all the hard work that you put into it. Like we said earlier, if you haven't seen The Torch yet, there's a link in the description. I encourage you to go check it out. Share with your friends, share with your teacher. Tell everybody you know who's in JCL, because The Torch US is not just for people who are familiar with National Convention. As you can see, if you're interested in cooking or ancient Roman diet, there's something in there for you. If you're interested in modern myths, there's a short story for you to read. There's something in there for absolutely everyone. We say that about this show, that there's something here for everyone, and that's absolutely true of the Torch US too. So go check that out. Be sure to subscribe. Add your name to the email list if you haven't already, and we'll send you the next Torch, which will come out when, Irene?
March 1st. So
March 1st? Do what?
Be on the lookout for that.
Yep, and be sure to check out NJCL social media so you can see our Instagram and Facebook and Twitter links for announcements asking for submissions. So when Irene needs pictures for the cover or needs these submissions like the creative arts, the modern myth, etc., we'll make those posts on social media, and you can see, NJCL is looking for content for The Torch. I can submit something, and then I can see my name in print, or at least on the digital version of The Torch. Or you can always print out The Torch if you want. The hyperlinks won't work, and the videos won't, the slideshows won't go, but it'll still be a nice thing you can hold in your hands. So thanks so much, Irene. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks for our interview.
Yeah.
Okay. See ya.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks. Okay. Let's see. Nope. Here we go. Okay, that's our show, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you to our incredible guests. I love these panel discussions. I had a really great time talking with our SC lawyers. If you ever come to the National Convention, you'll certainly see some of them there, and you can ask them more. If you have any questions that we weren't able to get to, please leave those as comments in the video, in the description below. If you have any questions about law school or applying for law school or taking the LSAT or what it's like, running negotiations or something like that, let us know, and we'll get the panelists to answer. With that, it's been an hour. Thanks so much for tuning in this December 7th. We will see you next week. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.